Hey, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that we're going to be talking about today is Masters of the Universe. If you've watched any of my past videos, you know that I am a Masters of the Universe collector because they're always right here behind me. So, if you're an old school vintage Masters of the Universe fan, you probably recognize this Castle Grayskull. That's the original one from the 80s. And you would probably remember the figures looking like this. Here's my vintage merman. So yeah, this is the old school stuff. Now you might not be aware that since kind of the tail end of 2008, Masters of the Universe has made a comeback in a line called Masters of the Universe Classics. It's not available in stores anywhere, but Mattel had released these directly to the consumer. So you ordered them online from Mattel every month. And that ran pretty strong from 2008 right up until about 2016, maybe into 2017. I can't recall. But anyways, after Mattel stopped doing that, a small company called Super 7 took over the license. And so for the last couple of years, Super 7 has been releasing Masters of the Universe Classics figures in the same style as Mattel had been doing for the last bunch of years. And they've got two different lines going now. So one of them is the Masters of the Universe Classics, which is figures in a particular style that aren't really based on a particular look, like maybe a little mix of the old toy, the old cartoon, the old comic book, maybe some new design elements, but they all have a shared aesthetic across the line. But then there's another kind of sub-line called Club Grayskull, and these figures are based specifically on the Filmation cartoon from the 80s. So Mattel released a couple of these just when they were winding down their classics line, but Super 7 has really ran with it, and they've released a couple of complete waves of these animation-based figures. So I just got Club Grayskull Wave 3 in the other day. So it was 4 new figures in Wave 3, as well as I ordered 2 Ultimate figures. So I showed these all the other day in like an unboxing video, and it's been killing me because I haven't actually unboxed them yet. They're still here in their boxes. So I just figured I would use this video to talk about all these figures in a little more detail since I didn't really have time in my unboxing video. So yeah, today we're going to take a look at all 6 figures. So Wave 3 Club Grayskull, plus Ultimate Skeletor and Ultimate He-Man. So yeah, let's get started. So here's the packaging for the Club Grayskull figures. They all have the same outer packaging. So you'll see here it's got kind of a picture of Castle Grayskull on the front and the sides and the top. And the front of it looks like the jaw bridge, that the door that opens up there on the front of the castle. On the back, nothing special. And so this sleeve slides off the top. And there's the figures inside. Now I open up all my figures here, so I'm just going to tear this open. I don't care if it gets destroyed. I know some people like to keep their figures in the packaging. And I don't know how they feel about these packages, because as neat as they are with all this deco, like just to compare it, I don't have one of the classic figures on the packaging, but here's Skeletor here on this style blister card. But you can see here, if you collected him like that, he's very easy to display. You could pin that to the wall and show off the whole figure. And that's kind of what all the classics have been like since 2008. But when they switched to this Club Grayskull design, it's a neat package, but it's a little harder to see the figure. They're kind of, it's a little darker. But yeah, anyway, I don't care about the packaging, so I'm going to tear this open and we'll take a closer look at Grizzlor. So this is Grizzlor. Now before I move on to the figure, I just wanted to quickly mention the packaging again. I probably should have showed you this a second ago. But on the back of each of these packages, once you slide that sleeve off, there is some original artwork on the back as well as a bio. So even if you do open up your figures, you might want to keep them just for this, if nothing else. So yeah, onto the figure. So this is my first time really looking at them too. And yeah, he looks pretty much as I expected. Like, the design is simple. There's not a whole lot of sculpted detail in any of that fur. But that's because he's supposed to look like he was on a cartoon. And in the cartoons, obviously, they couldn't put a lot of detail into the fur because that would take way too long to draw. So yeah, just some basic shapes. And there's the head sculpt there. Yeah, I think he looks pretty cool. Now he did come with a couple of accessories. So he's got this Horde shield. And his hands don't look like they're sculpted necessarily to hold things all that great. Ah, there we go. So there's the shield. And then he's also got this thing. And I don't know what that is. Hardcore fans will know what this is, I'm sure. With a lot of these figures, they tend to just pack these random little power weapons. Because almost every episode, Skeletor or Hordak were chasing after some sort of magical weapon that would help them win. And so sometimes Super 7 and Mattel would just make these little gizmos and stick them in the packaging randomly with guys. I don't know if that's anything specific to Grizzlor. Maybe if I'd read the bio on the back of the package, it would explain it. But yeah, so that's his little thing. Now, just for comparison purposes, I'll break out the Classics Grizzlor. So yeah, you can see they're pretty different. So this is the one that came out, I don't know the year exactly, maybe 2011, 2012, something like that. But this figure here is based more on the vintage figure. So while the old cartoon looked like this, the toy you bought looked more like this. It had real hair. And yeah, they didn't quite line up. So if you really loved that look from the cartoon, you were out of luck because you had this big hairy thing to play with. Now I tended to like the toy designs more than the animated designs, so I was gravitated towards that look. So I was glad when the Classics line started, they were based more on the toy than the cartoon. But I've had these guys here for a couple of years, and it's really cool now, rather than just have the He-Man toy line fizzle out, that we're getting these different takes on these characters. So yeah, these two are totally different, that I can display them on the shelf, and they could be, you know, two different characters, maybe part of that same species. And yeah, so I think Grizzle looks pretty great. As far as I can tell from playing with him for those couple of minutes, all his articulation appears to be pretty standard for all these figures. Swivel ankles and everything's good and tight, which is good. You don't want anything too loose. Yeah, so that's Grizzlor. So next up, we'll take a look at Fisto. So some cool artwork on the back. Again, he's got a little bio there. Alright, let's crack him open. So here is Fisto out of the packaging. So he's got a pretty great head sculpt there. Nice mustache. Let's spin him around here. So just like with Grizzlor, his design is pretty simple to capture that animated look. Like his glove here, very, very flat looking. There's no kind of painted shadows or anything like that, which I like because it's all true to the animated look. The only accessory that Fisto came with is this sword here. And so just feel him out here for the first time. Again, he feels pretty stiff. His legs are a little looser, but not too bad. It's not like they jangle around or anything. So he seems to stand pretty good. Now, I don't have the Classics Fisto to compare to, because he was one of those characters that just sold out immediately. The way it used to work with Mattel is you could either pay for the whole subscription at the beginning of the year, and that would commit you to buy every single figure all year long, or you could wait till the 15th of each month when they would put them up for sale on their website and hope that they had enough stock left over, and you would put it in your cart and you would buy it. And I was successful most months, but there was a couple of months, like Fisto's month, where he went up for sale and he was sold out in a matter of minutes, and I never got one. And then he sold for a whole lot of money on the secondary market, so I figure they must have made him in lesser numbers than they did some of the other figures. And so yeah, it's really bothered me for years that I didn't have Fisto in my Masters of the Universe collection, because he is what I would consider one of the main characters. Some of the kind of odd characters or newly created characters, they might have looked cool, but if you didn't have them, it didn't feel like a hole in your collection. But Fisto is one of the characters from the classic toy line. My brother had him when we were kids, so yeah, I'm very glad to get him now. So for comparison purposes, though, I can bring in his arch nemesis. So this here is Jitsu from the Classics line. So just like they did in the vintage toy line, Fisto had his giant metallic fist, and Jitsu had his giant metallic karate chopping hand. So these two can finally square off. Now, just while I've got him here, I'll just mention Jitsu is probably one of my least favorite Classics figures. Something to do with that head sculpt. Even though it's a very nice sculpt and it's very detailed, it just it doesn't really match the rest of the toy line. I think they had a different sculptor on that one, and it really shows. Plus, the head looks kind of small compared to the body, so it's not the greatest Jitsu. But they actually do have an animated Jitsu that was available exclusively at a convention last year. So I don't have it, but if I decide that I want to upgrade it so my Jitsu matches my Fisto a little better, I could get that animated version of Jitsu. So I just may do that. But anyway, so that is Fisto. Next up, we have Shira. So you'll see her here in the standard Grayskull packaging. Nice drawing on the back. Little bio as well. And I will say about this figure, the prototype they showed us looked like that, and she looked fantastic. And then when the figure actually started showing up in people's hands and they saw this face, they realized that it didn't quite match up with the prototype, and a lot of people have been complaining online. I'm not that picky, I suppose. I feel that, just like when you go to McDonald's and you see the picture of the Big Mac on the poster, it doesn't necessarily match what you get. Those prototypes are one-offs. A lot of time and effort is put into them. The mass-produced figure rarely comes out as good as the prototype, so I think people might be freaking out over nothing. Obviously, I'd like it to look, identical to that, but this is still a pretty decent figure. So let's pop her open and take a look at it. Alright, so this is Shira. So you can see here she came with her sword, her shield. She also came with this boomerang thing. Again, this is probably something specific to an episode of the cartoon. I don't really remember her using it, but still, it's always cool when they give us little odds and ends like that. So let's get a closer look at this face. Yeah. If people weren't being so critical and posting up all these side-by-side images online, I probably wouldn't have even noticed there was anything different about it myself, to be honest with you. I think it's fine. Anyway, and the rest of the figure, it's fine too. Like the other ones I showed you, the colors are very flat, it's very basic, all to help capture that animated look. So yeah, and the articulation looks good. And she's able to stand up all right on her own, which is good. And just to compare, I'll bring in one of the classics, Shira. I have a couple of them. So this is Shira. I also have her in her civilian identity, Adora. And I also have Bubble Power Shira. So I don't know what face you like better. But you can see the outfits are the same. It's just one. This one tends to have a little less detail. This figure also seems a little more petite. She's not quite as big. Even the skirt piece, everything looks a little smaller maybe on this animated Shira. But yeah, I think she looks pretty good. So this is Shira. So next up we have Mantenna. Now this is the real highlight of the wave for me. because Mantenna was my second favorite Masters of the Universe Classics character, or Masters of the Universe character when I was a kid. Merman was by far my favorite, but then Merman was my second favorite. But I'll tell you, he wasn't my second favorite because of his animated appearances, because this is what he looked like in the Shira cartoon. I liked him because of the original toy. The original toy was kind of creepy looking as opposed to this goofball. So it's kind of neat to get a figure of the goofball version, but if this is what my vintage toy looked like, I don't think I ever would have liked Mantenna as much as I do. Anyway, let's open this up and take a closer look at him. Okay, so this is Mantenna in all of his glory. So you'll see he's got the 4 legs. And this is one thing that they really improved on from the vintage toy. Is in the old toy, you could barely even tell that he was supposed to have 4 legs. His legs were just kind of, it was 1 leg on each side, but it just kind of had a line through it, so you could kind of, it was sculpted to look like it was 2 legs really packed tightly together. But yeah, in the cartoon he always had 4 legs like this, and so it's cool that they're able to now actually design him that way. So for accessories, he came with this ray gun. He also came with 2 extra hands. I'm not really sure why. They look pretty similar to the hands he's got there, but whatever. So there is the head design. So yeah, he is pretty goofy looking. But he looks like he leapt right off of the TV screen. Again, the flat colors, the simple designs. It works really well. And he does have another cool accessory, which I'll pop on in a second here. So he's got the bugged out eyes. That was kind of Mantenna's gimmick. If you remember from the vintage toy line back in the 80s, all the toys had like kind of a feature that would, like Fisto, for example, you know, you pulled his hand back and he swung it forward to punch, and Tongue Lasher's tongue came out, and Stinkor actually stunk. So Mantenna, on the old toy, you push a little knob on the back of him, and his eyeballs would push out and bug out of his head, because that was something he did on the cartoon a lot. So these modern He-Man figures don't really have those type of features, but they try and replicate them whenever they can. So rather than have the eyes pop out on the one head, you just pop this on, and you can kind of simulate that feature. Now, I want to just compare this guy to the classics version of Mantenna, and this thing is awesome. I was super stoked to get this thing a couple of years ago. So you'll see here, it's based on the vintage toy, and you'll see why I like the vintage toy more than the cartoon look. And see, this thing looks freaky, like all those teeth, and it's hard to know what's going on with his head there. It's kind of like a sarlacc pit, you know, like a predator. I don't know. And yeah, he looked muscular. The colors were darker. So yeah, a lot of things about this toy is true to the 80s toy, but kind of amped up to 11. Like now he's got the 4 actual legs. His face is even scarier now than it was on the vintage toy. So yeah, this is one of my favorite toys from the Masters of the Universe Classics. There's really no way that this little guy was gonna compare, but this guy's probably hard to find now. I don't know what he goes for on the secondary market, so if there's, you know, other Mantenna fans out there that got on board with the Classics line a little too late, and maybe this guy's too expensive to find, you can settle for this one. So yeah, it's not a bad figure at all. And if you were a big fan of the animated looks, then you might even prefer this one. But yeah, so that is Mantenna. So next up is the Ultimate Edition Skeletor. So this Skeletor here, this is one of the characters Mattel had actually released in the animated style. Mattel had released some of the core characters, so He-Man, Skeletor, Beastman, Trapjaw, and those guys were really hard to find. Like Fisto, they sold out almost immediately, and I didn't get a chance to get any of them. So I don't know if Super 7 is going to plan to re-release some of those other ones, like Beastman and Trapjaw. I hope they do. But it makes sense that they would at least re-release Skeletor and He-Man, as those are the ones that every fan is going to want. And they've called these one Ultimate Edition because they've added some stuff. Now, I'm not sure if one of the accessories are new. I think maybe just the axe, because I'm sure the other Skeletor would have came with a sword and the Havoc staff. But what's also new here is they've got that laughing or cackling head that Skeletor always had in the cartoon. So that's pretty cool that we finally got that. So yeah, let's pop him open and take a look. So this is Skeletor. And I can tell you, this guy's awesome. As soon as I opened him up, I loved it. Like, he feels good. He looks great. Like, that head, that really is like straight out of the cartoon. So yeah, this is just a really cool figure. Like that a lot. So for accessories, as I showed you in the packaging, he's got his Havoc staff there with the ram's head. He's got this axe, which we got with a prior figure once before. I think it might have came with Plundor, the rabbit man. We got the laughing head, which looks great too. And I didn't even notice the thing at first, but he's got one of those Eternian power trinkets. I'm not sure which one this is, but this is like some sort of Infinity Stone or an engagement ring or something. But so that's neat every time they throw in one of those things. But yeah, Skeletor, he looks great, moves great. The colors look really good. Yeah, no complaints here. This guy's awesome. And this is my most classic Skeletor yet, actually, because I wasn't on board with the Masters of the Universe Classic line right from the beginning. I managed to get most of the figures, but some of the very first ones they released obviously were He-Man and Skeletor, and I didn't get the original ones because I got versions that were released later. So my default Skeletor in my collection right now is this one, and so this He-Man or this Skeletor. If you remember back in the vintage line, the second versions of He-Man and Skeletor that came out were in these like battle damage armor. And so in the vintage toy, it was a clean chest plate, but then if you flicked it once, it had one axe scratch across it, and if you flicked it again, it had two scratches. So with this figure, it simulated that flipping action by giving you 3 removable plates. So you could put on a clean one chop or 2 chops. Anyway, so that's the Skeletor I have. I don't actually have one in this kind of classic Skeletor outfit. And this figure came with a head that was accurate to the vintage toy, which was kind of rounder, not as scary, but it had that kind of greener glow with red eyes. Maybe it didn't have red eyes. Anyway, I scrapped that one when I got this head. This head was actually a bonus item that came with Demo Man, and it was based on Skeletor's look from the mini comics that used to come with the old toys. So I loved that head, plopped it on my Battle Armor Skeletor, and this has been the Skeletor in my collection. Now I do have a couple other ones. I do have Keldor, which is his pre-Skeletor mode. Here's another one. This is Skeletor based off the New Adventures of He-Man, which had kind of a sci-fi vibe to it. So yeah, all of these are cool, but I think it's pretty clear that this is Skeletor. So yeah, he'll be the focal point of my collection from here on out. And lastly, we have He-Man. So like Skeletor, an animated He-Man was released by Mattel back when they were winding down in 2016. But it didn't have all these extra parts. I can't recall what it had. It might have just been the sword and the shield. This one has 3 alternate heads. And I don't know if there's anything else in there. I guess I'll find out in a second when I pop them open. But yeah, let's take a look. So here is He-Man. And just like with Skeletor, I was a big fan of this figure as soon as I opened him up. He just like looks great. Looks exactly how I remember him from the cartoon. His shield, big and bright, looks great. sword. And I didn't notice until I opened him up, but he's got a sheath on the back of him there for his sword, so he can store it. I don't know if we've seen that before, so that might be a first. And I also didn't see inside the packaging that he does come with a battle axe that was kind of hidden behind the shield. So that's great. As well as all the alternate heads. So there's the weird robot head. This glowing eyes head. And this laughing head. Which, in the cartoons, He-Man was a pretty jovial fella, so that makes sense that we'd get the laughing head as well. So, yeah, articulation looks really good. Oops. He's nice and sturdy. Yeah. Well, this isn't just part of these figures. I'll just comment since I'm seeing it right now. I'm not a fan of this look on the leg. You'll see the way that joint sits. Like, that doesn't look like any human joint I've ever seen before. It's kind of wonky looking, but that's on most figures, and I guess I can deal with that. But yeah, so this is a nice looking He-Man. And as with Skeletor, I don't have a classics version in this exact outfit to compare to. I didn't bother to go seek one out because there was enough other He-Mans coming out. I have the Prince Adam He-Man. I have the King He-Man version. So this version is the one that was my kind of default He-Man for quite a while. This is Thunder Punch He-Man, based on one of the vintage toys where you put caps in this backpack here, and it would snap to make a thunder sound when he punched. This one doesn't actually do that, but it comes with the cap and a shield, just like the vintage one. And yeah, so it's okay. It was never my favorite He-Man, but the thing of it was, I never really liked any of the head sculpts on the classic versions of He-Man. It didn't quite look like the cartoon, it didn't quite look like the vintage toy. You know, it was fine, but not great. So actually, the He-Man that I consider my default, my main He-Man in my classics collection is actually this one here. And this one is based on the short-lived 2002 He-Man series, which, if you haven't seen, go check it out because it was awesome. It was much more contemporary, kind of based on, you know, some anime. It was a lot flashier, but it had some really cool character designs. And I'll be honest, as a kid, He-Man was probably my least favorite He-Man figure from the Masters of the Universe line. Like, when it came to the good guys, I preferred Stratos and Buzz-Off, you know, any of the kind of creatures. And part of it was because He-Man was just kind of bland and with this page boy haircut, kind of dorky. I really liked what they did with him in the 2000 series, and I thought He-Man was actually cool for the first time. So, I love this He-Man figure. But let's be honest, if I brought this in and put it on my desk at work, a lot of people wouldn't know what the heck that was. They might be able to guess. But this one here, if they've ever seen He-Man, they know this is He-Man. This is, you know, like they say, the ultimate version of He-Man. It sums him up perfectly. And yeah, I think he's pretty great. So all in all, this turned out to be a pretty good shipment of figures from Super 7. So that is Wave 3 of Club Grayskull from Super 7. These figures are no longer available to order. They are made to order, so you usually have about a month or so to place your pre-order, and then Super 7 makes as many as are ordered. So if you like these figures and you want to track some down, you're going to have to turn to the secondary market. So somewhere like eBay, Big Bad Toy Store still has some on sale. So yeah, head on over there. And as for this video, if you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and please leave me any comments. So thanks a lot for watching.